बीए पार्ट फर्स्ट के विद्यार्थियों के लिए आज हम स्टोरी डिस्कस करेंगे ए कप ऑफ टी बाय कैथरीन मैन्सफील्ड। ये स्टोरी पार्ट फर्स्ट के विद्यार्थियों के सेकंड पेपर में प्रेस्क्राइब्ड है। ए कप ऑफ टी is a 1922 short story by Catherine Mansfield. It was first published in the Storyteller in the May 1922. So, before we discuss about a cup of tea, the story, first we will talk about the author Catherine Mansfield. Catherine Mansfield Buchem was born on October 88 in the Wellington, New Zealand. In her short span of life, she wrote many remarkable stories. She began writing career at the age of 19 and was deeply influenced by the style of Anton Chekhov. She married the famous critic John Middleton Murray in 1918. She joined the Bloomsbury Group and was a good friend of Virginia Woolf. She died of tuberculosis at the age of 34. Her executive stories bring out psychological conflicts. Her influence on the writers of the 20th century has been immense as she constantly strived to explore new horizons with her writing. Her major works include The Garden Party, The Drover's Nest, and Something Childish. So, A Cup of Tea is a 1922 story by Mansfield. It was first published in the Storyteller in May 1922. It later appeared in The Dove's Nest and Other Stories. Her short stories first appeared in Melbourne in 1907, but literary fame came to her in London after the publication of a collection of short stories called A German Pension. The main character of the short A Cup of Tea, the Rosemary Fell, is a fictional reconstruction of Mansfield's wealthy first cousin once removed, the writer Elizabeth von Anne. Now about the story. The story A Cup of Tea is taken from Mansfield's collection The Dove's Nest and Other Stories. It is the tale of an upper-class wealthy woman called Rosemary. Rosemary Fell, a wealthy young married woman, goes to Curzon Street to shop at florist and is an antique shop in which she admires but does not buy a beautifully painted small ceramic box. Before going to the car, Rosemary is approached by Miss Smith, a poor girl who asks for some money to buy tea. Instead, Rosemary drives the girl to her home, determined to show her the dreams to come true, and that rich people did have hearts. At the Fells home, Mrs. Smith eats her full of food and tea. She then begins to tell Rosemary of her life until Rosemary's husband Philip comes in. Although initially surprised, Philip recovers and asks to speak to Rosemary alone. Rosemary Fell, a wealthy young woman, goes to Curzon Street to shop at the florist. In the library, when Philip wants to talk to Rosemary in alone, in the library, Philip conveys his disapproval. When Rosemary resists dismissing Mrs. Smith, Philip tries another, more successful tactics. He plays to Rosemary's jealousy and insecurity by telling her how pretty he thinks Miss Smith is. Rosemary retrieves £3 notes and presumably sends the girl away. Rosemary's first vow to look after and be frightfully nice to Mrs. Smith. Later, Rosemary goes to her husband and informs him that Mrs. Smith won't dine with us. She first asks about the antique box from the morning, but then arrives at her true concern, quietly asking Philip, "Am I pretty?" The story ends with this question. A Cup of Tea is a modernist style short story written by Catherine Mansfield in 1922. Rosemary, the protagonist, is caught up in a fantasy of helping others, but it doesn't go as planned. This post takes you a podcast and further reading about the story. Catherine Mansfield stories are known as the canvas painted with complexity of life. They explore the innermost regions of the mind and unearth dramatization. A lady helps a poor girl and takes her home for tea and food. When the husband gets to know this, he tries to stop Rosemary as he feels that Mrs. Smith should not be there with them. He declares that he has found the girl awfully pretty. This changes the equations and jealousy wins over generosity. There is another aspect may be hidden in the story. The husband does not fall for the poor girl's beauty. Rather, he just wants his wife to get rid of the lady she has bought in. Philip, who suggests that he shall read the Millionaire's Gazette so that he can talk to their new guest. It is a reference to the snobbishness of the husband as well. Rosemary was not helping the girl out of some true love. It was an effort to pacify her own social service fashion, which is as much in trend as it was in those days. Husband plays a trick by showing his affections toward Miss Smith. He knows his wife and generates a feeling of insecurity and jealousy intentionally. Money is given to the girl, but she is chased away by Rosemary and then she returns to her stereotype character and tries to woo the husband by her looks and makeup. Nothing wrong though, but we are confused and intrigued about her fake, helpful heart which forgets the purpose of helping others. The moment she feels that the charity she was doing can be a treat to her own family life. So, a cup of tea is one among Catherine Mansfield's successful stories. The central theme of the story revolves around jealousy, insecurity, and materialism. Her style is flowery and racy, bringing a great deal of dramatic effect, which takes the reader by surprise. So, this was a summary of the story A Cup of Tea. In next video, we will discuss a critical analysis of the story A Cup of Tea.